This is the regular meeting of the Compliance and Amendments Committee set for Tuesday, August 11th, 2009. Roll call, please.
Member Craven Green.
Present.
Member Craven Green present. Member Chu. Member Chu excused. Member Johnson.
Here.
Member Johnson present. Member Nee.
Here.
Member Nee present. Member Washburn. Member Washburn absent. Madam Chair, there is a quorum.
Thank you. I would ask if there are any agenda changes.
We had no agenda changes, Madam Chair.
Seeing none, please call item 1.
Item 1 is the approval of July 14, 2009 regular meeting minutes.
Madam Chair, I have a question. On page 2 of the minutes, page 5 of our packet, under item 3, in the third paragraph, it mentions William Strong of the Department of Building Inspection said his director revisited the fee schedule and decided to eliminate the $6.50 fee. I'm wondering if he said that or if he said that that fee would be reduced to 10 cents a page. Can you refresh our memories on that, Mr. Rustum?
My recollection is the word he used was eliminate. And then we
Eliminate.
had to find out, well, then what is the fee? I believe he did use that phrase, though.
Okay. Other than that, I have a few minor grammatical kind of things, but I will email them to Mr. Rustum.
Thank you. Member Johnson? Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
We'll take public comments on the minutes. Seeing none, public comment is closed. Please call the vote.
On the motion, Member Chu excused. Member Johnson.
Aye.
Member Johnson, aye. Member Nee.
Aye.
Member Nee, aye. Member Washburn. Member Washburn absent. Member Craven Green.
Aye.
Member Craven Green, aye. Madam Chair, we have 3 ayes.
Thank you. Please call item number 2.
Item number 2 is the continued hearing on the status of the April 28, 2009 Order of Determination of Anonymous Stands against the Department of Building Inspection.
Thank you. And is the complainant present?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I omitted to send out an email reminding the parties about the meeting.
Okay. Do you know if, I see the complainants are here. Do you know if Mr. Strom has been notified or anyone else from DBI?
No one from DB has been notified.
Okay. Well, we'll take that into, I don't see anyone here from the department in the audience, but we'll take that into consideration before, if we decide to continue or take any action on this. I appreciate that. Thank you. I see the anonymous tenants are here. You have 5 minutes to update us about
Good
the
afternoon.
status.
Good afternoon, members. This is Anonymous Tenants here. Can I give you their fee schedule, DBI's fee schedule, so you have a copy of it? I believe the 3 items I checked, they are supposed to provide the itemized cost analysis on, so you'll have a record of it. DBI has been charging the public $6.50 per copy for years, and they claim they have an itemized cost for this charge in their 42-page matrix report. DBI has challenged Sunshine Ordinance Task Force jurisdiction twice, and both times DBI did not show up for the hearings. Sunshine Ordinance Task Force issued an order against DBI and ordered DBI to produce the itemized cost analysis, and DBI had an additional 50 days to comply with the order. After the order was issued, DBI continued to overcharge the public. DBI has consulted the city attorney to avoid complying with the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force flaws. DBI now eliminated the $6.50 charge on their fee schedule in order not to comply with the order and refused to provide the itemized cost analysis. DBI was given another 30 days to provide the itemized cost analysis. DBI now provided the members a fee adjustment ordinance instead of an itemized cost analysis. And these are all above our violations. And we were wondering how much more does the public have to put up with? This has been ongoing for over almost a year now, and DBI has not complied with the order. This is a gross waste of the city's citizens' tax dollars. This is not a trip to the moon. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to provide analysis on their cost. DBI should provide the citizens the itemized cost analysis immediately for the original order, and now for the new order that was placed on them last meeting. and they should be penalized for the violations of all of the laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other party in support of the complainant who wishes to present facts and evidence? Thank you. You have up to 3 minutes.
Yes. Good afternoon, members. On the April 28th, Sunshine Task Force issued order determination against DBI for failing to conduct or prove an itemized cost analysis justifying the $650 per page cost. On the July 13, 2009, 1 day before the CAC hearing, DBI issued a letter claiming that DBI eliminated the $650 per page charge. This letter was issued 1.5 months after the Sunshine Task Force order. During this period of time, DBI continued to overcharge the public and charge $650 per page documents. As the member of public, we have the right to know how DBI come up with the charge, which is 650% more than the fee the law permit them to charge. But DBI has refused to provide. We have been paying $650 for a long time, and I believe that we have right to know how did they come up this cost. On July 14, 2009, CAC hearing, member of CAC requested DBI should produce the itemized cost analysis for anything that DBI charged over 10 cents. So far, they have not provided any. On the July 24, when I ordered a public permit application, they charged me $3 per page without any analyst posted or can explain it to me how does come up $3 now. I asking you to order the DBI to comply with the law. It has been, they have been trying to avoid to comply with the law, and they should provide the itemized cost analysis for anything over 10 cents as you order them to provide. Thank you for your time. Bye.
Thank you. Just to be certain, is there anyone here from DBI wishes to respond? No one here is here from DBI, perhaps in part because we failed to notify them of the hearing. The matter is with the committee for discussion.
Question. Mr. Chris, was DBI notified of this hearing?
No, through the chair, no.
Okay. I do have a question for the lady who presented facts and evidence. If she could approach the microphone, please. I just want to clarify, since the task force issued the order of determination, have you subsequently, since that time, been charged more than 10 cents a page?
Yeah, I have the receipt. 1 page.
You have?
1 page of public record.
With
with
You
the
have to be,
receipt.
for what? There are different fees for different things.
Okay.
Our complaint was about electrostatic reproductions,
Okay.
just for purposes of clarification.
Okay, so you were charged.
Yeah, this is computer. This document is on the computer. The girl is just printed. I saw her printed.
So that was an electrostatic reproduction?
Yeah, this is $3. I had the receipt. If you want to take a look.
Not necessary.
Okay. That's July 24.
That was July 24th,
Yes.
and that was for an electrostatic reproduction?
Yes,
A printout from the computer?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is very recent permit application.
Okay. And at that time, did you ask for any kind of a cost analysis on why they were charging you the $3?
The girl says she doesn't know anything. She says she can just give me the receipt.
But
charge.
did you ask for a cost analysis at that time?
For the girl, no.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe that they're supposed to be. They're supposed to post it by law.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the issue here, if you look at the fee schedule that the anonymous tenants provided us, it shows that for electrostatic reproduction, which I'm not 100% sure, honestly, what that means or what that encompasses in terms of all of the copies that are made by DBI, the cost for each page is 10 cents, which is, I believe, the good result the anonymous tenants have received and have secured. It used to be $6.50 a page. They have complied. The order of determination was, to the extent you're charging this $6.50, and we find that you haven't substantiated it, you need to substantiate it by providing the detailed cost analysis. In lieu of doing that, they reduced their fee to 10 cents, which complies with the Sunshine Ordinance for this category of documents. So I believe that there's nothing further we need to do with DBI. They have complied to the order of determination to the extent that they're no longer charging $6.50 a page for electrostatic reproduction. Now, the issue being raised by anonymous tenants is a different one. They are still being charged $3 for hard copy prints. So it shows here on the fee schedule of 8.5 inch by 11 inch copy from Aperture Cards, electronic copies of building records, scanned or computer generated. That, unfortunately, in my view, is a different issue. That's not the issue that was raised in the original complaint, which dealt with $6.50 for copies of electrostatic records. I don't think we have the ability, at least in terms of compliance with the order of determination, to find a violation or make a referral based on that allegation. Unfortunately, the way I see it, there would need to be a complaint, or the issue could be set as a separate agenda item, if you will, either through the chair of the task force at compliance amendments or education and outreach to go into the fee schedule of DBI generally. But it's not appropriate, I don't think, for further findings of violation or referrals back to the task force by this body, if that makes sense. Member Nee?
Well, at the last meeting of this committee, we asked for a complete fee schedule from Mr. Strawn, and we asked him to provide a detailed cost analysis where any fee would exceed $15 per 10 cents per page, and it doesn't seem to me from the material submitted here that he's done that. And I have to add to this that what he's done here, it looks to me almost like an attempt to sandbag us. He has provided material totaling how many pages?
He's provided us a copy of an ordinance that, in part, on page one of the pages indicates that they're correcting their fee schedule to show 10 cents.
Madam Chair, page 28,
Thank you.
43 of the packet.
Page 43 of the
Right,
packet.
but all of this other stuff that pads it, that's extraneous material.
Yeah, I mean, he provided the whole ordinance. I mean, I guess he could have provided us one page, but I don't see that as sandbagging. But anyway, why don't you continue?
Okay. Anyway, all these other things besides the electrostatic copies, we asked them for a complete schedule, a fee schedule. He's given us and cost analyses where the fee will be more than 10 cents a page. And he's given us a fee schedule here with nothing else. And it seems to me that that's non-compliance.
Member Washburn?
I would agree. I wasn't here for the last meeting, but the minutes reflect that DBI was asked to provide a cost analysis, and there's none of that here, just flat fees without any rationale given for them.
And I would agree. Member Johnson?
And some of them went up dramatically. I know it was approved by the Board of Supervisors and Mayor Newsom, but it doesn't say within this documentation why.
Which fees are you talking about?
Oh, just some of the other ones.
Right, but those aren't related to public records.
Exactly.
And I don't think there's a justification for them to explain those. Those are related to, I'm sure, a long and detailed procedure about costs of permits.
But like he said, this was all turned in, so there isn't any explanation for any of it. It's
I
just
agree.
on page 43, where they said it was 15 cents for photocopy, has been lowered to 10. And she
I
says
agree.
that
If the issue is, have they provided a cost justification for each of their copying costs for public records that is over 10 cents, they have not done so. I don't think anyone can dispute that. What they've done is confirm that they're only charging 10 cents for electrostatic copies, which are the subject of the complaint. So my point is, from the issue of compliance with the order of determination, they've complied. Now, if the issue is, do we want to go into an analysis of every single cost that they charge for public records that's over 10 cents and whether or not there's an itemized justification that satisfies the requirements of the ordinance, I think that's a separate issue that would need to be separately agendized. I believe that what our job here is, has there been compliance on this narrow item? Has there been compliance with the order of determination? And I don't hear any analysis of why there hasn't been. If the issue is, have you justified all of your fees? I think that's maybe a good issue to investigate, but it's not the issue about compliance. And so what I would suggest is, if there's a motion to do so, or a request to do so by a member of this committee, or if the chair thinks that that's something that's more appropriate for a different committee, that be placed on an agenda as a new item.
Yeah.
But I don't see there's any further need for further action on this item issue, which is compliance with the order of determination. So, and I'm open to any other suggestions.
Now I see your point. You're looking at, the letter of the law, so to speak, versus the spirit, and now it's time to address the spirit. And I'm just wondering the best venue to do this. I don't know if it's EOT would be the way to go, because, that could be a first step. But it seems to me charging $3 or $3.50 for something that's printed from a computer is a real burden for the citizens.
Well, I have to agree with Chair Craven Green's analysis here. We're being asked to determine whether there has been compliance with an order of determination, and apparently there has been. So we could send this back to the full task force with a recommendation for referral to another committee such as EOT, or we can just move on without further action.
Or I don't believe we need to refer this back to the full task force. There's been compliance with order of determination, therefore it ends with us. Now the issue of whether or not the chair of the task force would like to see the issue of fees being charged by departments and the failure of those departments to substantiate those fees in accordance with the ordinance addressed as a educational issue or as a training issue by another committee, that's different. If the chair would like to place this with EOT or with the CNA committee or with another committee, I think that's fully within the prerogative of the chair. If a member of this committee would like to have that issue scheduled as a general discussion before this committee, I'm willing to hear that motion and schedule it if a majority of the members of the committee want to hear it. So it's really as to what, those are, in my view, the two ways going forward. So I would defer to Member Nee, who's the chair of the task force, as to what he thinks would be the best way forward.
I'll have to give it some thought. An off-the-top referral to EOT might seem to make sense, but I'll have to give it some more thought, and I would welcome, in the meantime, certainly welcome thoughts from my colleagues.
All right, let's take public comments on this and then return for final deliberation. Public comment on this issue?
Yes, thank you. I'm Peter Warfield, Library Users Association. I did not come here specifically to make comment on any particular case, nor am I very familiar more than cursorily on this matter, but I'm very disturbed by this discussion and by a sense that the public is being let down. If somebody murders citizen X and then comes back and has murdered citizen Y, it seems to me that in this body you might say, well, we didn't say that they couldn't murder Y, we just said they couldn't murder X. And so they have complied with their order of determination. The order of, I think that the body has taken a reasonable approach in asking this department to come back with a justification, which is right here in the order of determination. The agency shall appear, I'm reading from page 11, from the order of determination issued May 5th. The agency, meaning the subject agency, shall appear before the Compliance Amendment Committee to discuss steps it will take to come into compliance with this order of determination. And it sounds to me as though the previous meeting, you specifically asked them to come back here with a cost analysis for any document costing more than 10 cents a page. That seems to me an outgrowth of this order of determination. I wasn't here, so I can't speak with full authority. But what would it take for a person to go to an agency that is over and over again violating apparently the law? Would that mean that on page 43 they would have to come and get 35 millimeter duplicards from roll film 350, microfilm and hard copy prints 8.5 by 11 350, 24 by 18 inch? They'd have to come back separately for justification of the $5 charge. On the next page, on and on, $6 for a so-called half-size copy from. Does that mean you would not tell them to take care of this properly just because a person came for one particular item, and only say to them, this very narrow version of the violation is what we find, and anybody who has a complaint about something else can start all over again with yet another hearing? I don't think that's a good decision to make. And one way or another, whether you deal with it as an order of determination or as a broader issue, I think it really needs, for the sake of the public, to be handled. I'd also like to draw your attention to Sunshine Section 67.30C. The task force, last sentence, the task force shall, from time to time, as it sees fit, issue public reports evaluating compliance with this ordinance and related California laws by the city or any department, office, or official thereof. You have very broad options as to what you have the powers to do, and however you handle it, I would certainly urge you to take a public interest approach to this matter. Thanks very much.
Further public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Is there a motion by the members?
I don't see any further action necessary.
Seeing no motion, no further action will be taken on this item, but I would encourage, if the anonymous complainants have a suggestion as to who might hear more broadly the issue of the fees being charged by DBI, to make suggestions to Chair Nee about where that might be best heard in their opinion. Thank you. Next item.
The next item is developing recommendations for the proposed electronic document retention policy of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force.
And I'll turn this over to Member Nee.
Okay. At my request, Mr. Rustam has invited a representative from the Committee on Information Technology to come make a presentation, ask and answer our questions. So if that gentleman is present, Mr. Robinson, I believe, is he?
Actually, yes. My name is Richard Robinson. I am the Chief Operations Officer for the Department of Technology. I am not the chair of the Committee on Information Technology.
Okay. Microphone.
Thank you.
Restate from the beginning?
No.
Okay. So I was not aware of any presentation. Again, I am not the director of the Committee on Information Technology. I am the I'm the chair on the architectural subcommittee who oversees architectural standards and policies.
Okay. Through the chair, Mr. Robinson, What we're doing is developing guidelines just for the task force for the moment on electronic records retention, storage, retrieval, backup, etc., the whole thing. And one of the areas that we're particularly interested in is emails, because there are an awful lot of cases where people have gone to agency X and asked for all emails dating from 6 months ago to the previous to a year earlier, and they're told that the emails are no longer, they've been destroyed basically. In one case, a citizen went to Supervisor Peskin's office not long after a certain issue had been resolved by the Board of Supervisors. The citizen asked Supervisor Peskin for all emails pertaining to this certain issue and was told they were destroyed. So what we want to know is what is feasible both technologically and fiscally in terms of email storage, retention, backup, retrieval. Because we don't we want to make it possible for citizens to come to an agency. And if there's an email or a series of emails that dealt with something maybe 2-3 years ago, that citizen should be able to view those emails. We want to develop first we want to basically clean up our own shop here so that we can come out with guidelines for ourselves and say, we've developed these guidelines for ourselves. They're a model. Please look at them and see, whether they're adaptable to your own situation. That's where we are. We want to basically lead by example is what we're trying to do here. So what can you tell us in all these respects?
Yeah. And if I could just add, your name came to us through Brian Roberts.
Correct.
We had asked Mr. Roberts to send a representative to this committee because we were not only looking at this issue of, for example, as Member Neat indicated, what's technologically and fiscally possible with the current system, but almost more importantly, our understanding is that COIT is involved in moving the current city's email system from the Lotus Notes application to a Microsoft Exchange application is what we understand. And part of what we're doing is not only developing recommendations, but weighing in on when and if the city moves to a new system, how can that system be set up to ensure that emails are adequately archived and able to be retrieved. So I'm not sure what of those two parts, what we can do now, what we should be looking at for the future, and what the time frame is for that future transition, you could speak to, if any. But we did get your name from Mr. Roberts, and that's why you were invited. Okay.
Well, I would be a good person to talk to about that. So I wasn't prepared for a PowerPoint presentation on this stuff. But to answer some of your questions, and if I can remember all of them, roll back to the beginning. A balance of what is technically feasible and what is fiscally feasible. Technically, you can save emails in some format in perpetuity. The reality of that is it starts to come with a significant fiscal cost to do that. Storage, retention, over time. So what the city has done, let me jump ahead. One of the things that's also absent is a clear policy on what data retention terms should be from a city attorney's office. So that's one thing that the Department of Technology struggles with. We have a finite amount of capacity with which to store emails in the system that we have. At some point in time, we reach that capacity, which right now I think we're at close to 98% capacity. Is that correct, Kim? Roughly 90 to 98% capacity in our email system. So the ability to continue to retain is problematic for us. One of the processes that we do is we ask people on their own volition to archive locally, if that's possible, some of their emails. That's really up to them. There's no clear outline policy from the city attorney's office or that the city has adopted as to what people will do and for how long those will be retained. So that's what we can do. Within that, the city also has other email platforms. There are some departments that are on Microsoft Exchange. They're on their own environments. They retain their own email and their own policies. So what typically happens is we get the request, we'll go back, we'll see what we have, whether that has been deleted from the environment that we administer and maintain, and if it's there and available, we provide a copy to the department or whomever it is that's requesting that. Going forward, the city has made a declaration, and we voted from a policy perspective to move off of the existing Lotus Notes platform, which is in-house, we call that on-prem, to a hosted Microsoft Exchange environment. So the city will not host the physical infrastructure itself. It'll be hosted by a larger aggregate provider, but the departments will still be able to administer usernames, IDs, and that. What we would like to, my personal position on this, is move to a more defined policy from the city's perspective. It's really not DT's ability to declare what the city's policy would be and what rules and regulations support that, but to get some clear indication as we move forward to this new environment to what the actual retention policy will be it 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, what needs to be retained, what can be moved locally and archived or held in storage in other media formats. So again, we are the utility organization. We provide as much as we can with the fiscal resources that we have as far as retention. Again, we've left the duration that people retain that to themselves. What we've done is we've given them a mailbox size. Once they fill that mailbox, they can't retain anything else, so it's left to them to archive it locally, or they just can't retain that type of information. It's also expected in the new platform that we move to hosted that there won't be these limitations to the degree that they are with mailbox size. So people should be able to retain things for 2-3 years if the mailbox, if their file size is larger. But again, we would still like to see a formal policy developed by the city that says implicitly, this is, it's 90 days, it's 1 year, or it's 2 years. And then at that point, the department can give them some type of fiscal analysis of what that would cost.
Or we're just taking notes. Member Need, do you have a question? I do, if you don't have one yet.
No, go ahead. I may have one or two later.
I'm sure
but
we will have them. I guess what's important from my perspective, or what I wanted to maybe hear about is when you're looking to migrate to a Microsoft Exchange, if that sounds like there's been a declaration of policy.
There has been a declaration of policy. We actually put a budget towards that to do that in the budget process. 70-80% of that budget was cut. So we're kind of back to square one with our Lotus environment as we figure out how to find funding to move forward on the hosted Exchange environment.
So do you have any kind of time frame at all at this point about when feasible or when this might be in place?
So what we're trying to do is figure out, since there was the estimate was about $3.5 million to move the city off of the Exchange, or off of the Notes environment to a hosted Exchange. $2.5 million of that was cut from the budget, leaving us with less than $1 million to go forward. There's another component that's part of that that's more technical in nature, and that's the implementation of an Active Directory structure throughout the city. So there's some technical things that need to be put in place for the city to actually fully utilize a hosted mail environment. We think that we can actually get that piece done and start to move and migrate some departments to a hosted Exchange. So we won't be able to do it in its totality, but we will be able to get that moving forward, and hopefully as funds become available later in the year as part of next fiscal, we can continue to move that plan forward.
So when do you think the first departments may be moved? Or, I know that's...
I couldn't give you a date. I mean, if it's my desire, I would do it yesterday.
Right.
This is more than a frustration to have to host two environments while we move that forward. Another thing that's
more expensive.
Another thing that's going on too is the city is in the process of moving its data center from one market plaza to another one. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, we'll have those contracts executed this week. That will change a little bit on how email is used throughout the city. We're actually upgrading the Exchange environment, making it more web based instead of people having to have clients. So we're doing some improvements with the system as part of that move. But again, to give you specific dates, I can't do that, again, as quickly as we can. I would like to do that. So I would like to see something within 6 months at least up for departments to start moving towards.
So it's basically, I guess my sense is it's basically you've decided that Microsoft Exchange is where you're going to go. It's starting, the hosting is starting for that, and you hope to be moving some folks over there within 6 months. So that piece, from the city's perspective, is essentially in place. Just coming up with the $2.5 million that hasn't been funded to move the remainder of the city off
Correct.
of Lotus Notes, that you deal with off of Lotus Notes and into this exchange, is what's outstanding. Is that accurate?
Correct, that is
okay.
accurate.
Member Nee?
Quickly, how is the determination being made as to which departments shift to a Microsoft Exchange? Is that like on a first come first served basis, or are you are there some criteria being set as to which departments get moved over, get converted first? How's that working?
So initially, when we were expecting the whole funding, there was a prioritization, and that was based on a couple things. One was need. The San Francisco Police Department was a department that had a high need. The Department of Public Health and Health Services had a need because they were sitting on aging infrastructure. So there was a priority to move about 10 to 11,000 users of our 20-something thousand user base. As we go into this with the budgeting that's being shifted, we need to sit down and come up with some evaluation criteria. I would expect that it will still be the police department as a priority to bring up initially, and then depending on how much money we have, whether that's enough to move a Department of Public Health or Health Services is still to be determined.
So if we came to you, the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, and said we'd like our system to be shifted from Lotus Notes to Microsoft Exchange, you couldn't just say, yeah, okay, you were one of the first to come to us, so you're among the first who will have it happen. We would have, if we wanted it to happen, we would have to establish with you, we'd have to satisfy you or whoever makes the determination that there is an urgent need for us to do this. Is that correct?
I think it's a balance of not necessarily urgency, but also ease. If it's something where you're moving 10 or 15 people and can be done relatively quickly in the training, I think the staff is amenable to that. One of the challenges that we have, too, is we have very small staff within the department. There are 3 people that do email administration centrally for the Department of Technology. And that's one of the things that we look to fix, too, is to normalize all of the people that administer email and actually bring that to a smaller, more efficient group than it is. So my recommendation would be is to contact the DT help desk to get in a request to the email group so we can start that communication with you. One of the things that we haven't done is gone out and been overtly proactive setting up this prioritization because I really don't know how much money is going to be left at the end of the day. Again, it was a significant budget cut that gives us pause to go back and analyze how much of the architecture stuff can be done and what subset of funding is available and what size of group we can actually get onto the hosted exchange environment.
I guess my major concern is it seems like the horse is already out of the barn to some extent. They're going with Microsoft Exchange. The question that's really at the forefront of my mind is, well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that you feel like you need more advice and analysis and guidance from the city attorney's office as to what should be the city's retention policy. I think there's been a huge issue there, at least with complaints before this task force. We found that certain departments have a 90-day policy. We have other departments who seem to not be following the policy. We have the Board of Supervisors who we're under. I mean, I'm not sure we could even just move the task force. Maybe we are a subset of the Board of Supervisors by and large in terms of how our administration is done. That's the reality. But the Board of Supervisors policy is, if you have an email you want to retain, you print it out in hard copy. A totally anachronistic policy for document retention in terms of the utility for the public and the maintenance of the historical record. And so we really need to narrow drill down on that issue and get some kind of guidance either from this body or from the city attorney's office, hopefully both, that would solve that issue citywide, that's going to be complex. That's not necessarily your bailiwick, but it does impact in terms of what can be done, what's feasible on the sort of things that you are dealing with and you are implementing. So that's why we really wanted to have you here. In terms of moving it, though, to Microsoft Exchange, my question is, how or is the Department of Technology keeping an eye on not only file size, how much size a user has, to how much messages they can keep, how many PDFs they can keep, but more importantly, how you're going to respond to requests, to issues of backing up emails, to restoring emails that have been deleted, to the ability to search for emails in response to a court order, a discovery order from a court in litigation against the city, or from requests from this body, from the Sunshine Task Force. Have you been looking at that issue? Is there a way that we can work with you to kind of go into that issue? I mean, what we don't want to see is what we have now, is a system that by all accounts or by most accounts is particularly difficult to restore emails from. It's particularly difficult to search for and respond to subject matter emails that may be the subject of a court order or that may be the subject of a Sunshine request. We want to make sure that that does not happen, that does not set up with the new system. That would be a travesty and arguably against the mandate of the Sunshine Ordinance itself, which requires new computer systems to be implemented in a manner that makes it easier for members of the public to request information. So if you could talk about that, has your eye been on that issue, what has been done, and whether or not there's a way that we can work with you or try to make sure those issues are addressed.
Absolutely. A lot of questions.
Yes.
So yes, I mean, I'm personally a big proponent of requirements. If something isn't defined, it's hard to deliver it. So part of this process as we go forward is we actually put out an RFP to have a consulting group come in and work with the client departments to determine what the real requirements were. So if the requirement had some legal, be it HIPAA, or if there was some hard legal foundation compliancy issue for that, and extract those requirements. Do that for all of the departments so we have a holistic view as what the requirements are. So departments will be solicited, all of them, as we go through this requirements capturing phase. Those pieces will actually be codified into the request for proposal that will go out for the hosted services. So that's what I'm hoping for, is that I have a specific prescriptive set of business requirements from client departments and a rationalization as to what those are as we go forward, and that's what we'll provide. We'll also be in the position where we'll have to figure out, okay, if one client department's retention requirements are much, much higher than the rest of them, then how do we structure that in the service offering that we provide? Is it that we just raise the bar to that level, or are we able to disaggregate those requirements and offer a different level of services? I would prefer that we raise the bar and keep it across the board for all departments. So we are looking at that. We have put a process in place. Again, fiscal issues came up with our ability to fund a consulting company to come in. We're hopeful that we've been able to work that stuff out and keep that work moving forward.
So the RFP is out, but it hasn't been fulfilled.
They're actually the RFP for the consulting group to come in and do the requirements phase it was put out. We actually did get a response, but we've had an inability to fund that because of the budget. But we think we have that resolved.
Do you, Madam Chair, Mr. Robinson, work with the COIT committee on IT?
I do. I am a chair of one of the subcommittees.
Okay, because we would like to establish a good, strong working relationship with that committee, and I understand that committee does have regular meetings. Is that correct?
We do. There's actually one tomorrow. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So they are announced 72 hours in advance. They are up on the city's website.
I was actually, Mr. Vane, is that how you say it, sent me email invitations. About 20 of them flooded my email box, and I couldn't quite figure out whether they were past meetings or future meetings. I think there might have been some of both.
Yeah, there are 4 subcommittees and then the main body.
Right.
And all of them meet on a monthly basis.
So I guess, in terms of our concerns, it sounds like the RFP is going to go out, and once that consultant is hired, that's one of their jobs, is to figure out what are the legal retention requirements because there are different requirements depending on whether they're, we've seen that in some of the record retention policies that we've been reviewing, whether they're medical records, property records, all sorts of different types of things have different retention requirements to them. And certain agencies that deal with environmental review documents or, as I said, property records have starkly different requirements in terms of retention. So that's one thing they're going to be doing. Is that correct?
Yes, it will be. And looking at other things, the disaster recovery component, as well as discovery requests. We're keenly aware of the pain that, the departments go through and everything goes through when they get a disclosure request, and would like to make sure that we've thought about this in the architecture of the system that we actually go forward with, that when a request comes in, be it through the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force or through the city attorneys or the district attorneys, it is much easier to identify the information in the emails and extract those, and also reduce the amount of redaction work that has to go down in the process. And there are tools out there. Again, it becomes the balance of finding hard business requirements that are supported with compliancy issues and balancing that with cost.
Madam Chair?
Member Washburn.
Yes, I heard you mention that you were taking a holistic approach to this huge project. And I would urge you to not only consider the business requirements of the various agencies and all of the laws governing them, but also that the public is another big constituency here, and probably the main one. So I'm not sure about specific plans for this consultant to work on these issues, whether this person would work with us to make sure that those needs are met.
Absolutely. Speaking for the department and personally, I don't know whether it's a new spirit, but we are very pro, and this direction comes from the mayor, open, transparent government. We're working on open transparency and that for the stimulus reporting. Email is no different to that. We feel that this stuff should be more open, more transparent. We've started discussions at actually changing significantly the paradigm. We'd be happy to have you guys on board with those discussions as we go forward. We've actually reached out to who helped us with the camera study, the folks at Berkeley and Citrus, the Bolt School of Law, Samuelson School of Public Policy, to have some conversations, because in making this paradigm shift, there's significant impacts to how people have done business in the past. Will be done, and we'd like to take those things into consideration when we try to be very proactive about open and transparent government.
I have another question. Right now, individual employees can archive materials at their discretion and delete at their discretion. And it sounds like this whole switch could take a great deal of time and it'll be rolled out. So I'm concerned about guidelines for the individual employee for managing email, since there's the big capacity problem now. Are there no guidelines for this?
I think, and we have Kim Thompson from our email and database group. My understanding is we basically have a limit threshold. And we leave people up to manage those. When they bust their threshold, they generally have to do some deletion so they can add emails or attachments to that system. That is kind of the only formal policy that we've gone forward with and been prescriptive about. And like I said, when we reach a certain threshold system-wide, we actually go out to the departments and the clients and say, look, you need to go through and delete your old emails that you don't need or ones that are duplicates. If you need to archive those on your local, that's really up to you to make that determination of what you're responsible to retain. I don't like the department being in the position of, creating policies for them arbitrarily. So the only one that we can really do is enforce a technical policy and saying you only have so much mailbox size, and leave that to them to manage.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't think it would be your responsibility to develop the policy. That's sort of our job. And I'm wondering if we want to entertain drafting some guidelines for managing emails, or is it too late?
Well, that's what we're trying to do.
Right. For the immediate situation of mailboxes that get full and the individual employees going, do I delete this one or this one? I imagine people would be nice to have some guidelines.
As a short response, each department has a document retention policy, and that's what they're supposed to apply in making decisions about all correspondence, not just email, but all correspondence in other categories of documents. And those those document retention policies have been approved by a commission or by the Board of Supervisors as appropriate, depending on the nature of the body. Now, the problem is in the application of that policy. Does this email count as correspondence that must be saved? And under the retention policy, generally, it's a minimum of 2 years. And so the problem becomes this interface between the mailbox limit size and the individual employee, and whether or not and how they've been advised by their department to deal with that issue. And as we've seen, some people are dealing with that issue by simply deleting emails based on dates, without regard to whether those documents qualify as correspondence that should be maintained. The other issue, as I said, is that even if those certain emails are correspondence that should be maintained, many of the document retention policies require them to be printed out and stored in hard copy. So we have this very complex issue where you have a set of document retention policies that are by no means consistent. Most of them are, but they're not all consistent, that each department and agency and employee has. You have the issue of whether they've been trained on it. Then you have the issue of whether or not we believe they're sufficient in this age of information technology to be printing out hard copies and deleting the original records, and whether or not that complies with the Public Records Act in the first instance. And then you've got the ability of each employee to actually appropriately comply with that policy, even if we were to agree with it. So it's very complex, this issue. But I mean, that's what this discussion is about. It's basically about how do we improve the city's document retention for electronic records. How do we improve not only the ability of the employees to comply with the stated document retention policies, but do those document retention policies need to be improved or broadened in light of the technological improvements that have been made with electronic records, and in light of the limits that we have with electronic retention? And what are some of the ways that we can work within those limits and make sure we have a policy that ensures that public records are being maintained? So, and that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Tall order.
Member Johnson?
I know that it's a big problem and request, but is there any way that we can ask for or implement a new amendment for, even if we just started here, to back up the hard drive? Because that's everything. I know that there are duplicate emails over and over that take up a lot of space. Correct. But technically, even those duplicates are still public record.
I'm not sure what the question is, but there are backup policies in place. And as we've seen with some of the complaints against the mayor's office, for example, or I guess more recently, there was one that was against DTIS for records that had been deleted by the mayor's office. There are backups, and there are backups in those notes, and there are backups made at a certain time and place as to the email box that was in existence on that date. So August 7th, 2009. That's going to look different than the backup that contains the email of that individual from August 7th, 2008. There will have been emails that have been deleted. There may be some that are still there. And so, I mean, those are in place. The question is, how do you make a system that allows you to basically go back and collate and pull out subject matter emails or emails from certain individuals or emails of a certain time or emails that contain certain words in an efficient way, which is what my main concern is as we go forward with the Microsoft Exchange system. So, I mean, we have backups, but they're basically useless unless you pay someone $8,000 to sit down and individually restore the emails and compare what's been deleted and restore them to Lotus Notes and then do the searches. So, I mean, that's the problem that I guess we're faced with in terms of retrieving documents.
And to some extent, even when you move to a new platform, you're going to have that type of issue because the snapshot on any given day is not going to be the same as a following day.
Right. And so, I mean, one of the concerns that we have with the Microsoft Exchange is ensuring that either there is innate functionality or built-in functionality that would allow for the type of retrieval and search capacities that Lotus Notes seems to either not have or be particularly poor at. Because those, and we're talking now as well as discovery requests and civil litigation. I mean, searching in emails and restoring emails for purposes of sunshine requests is very similar for purposes of civil litigation, except that departments seem to respond to civil litigation requests more readily because of the threat of contempt by a judge, which we don't have. So, I mean, they're the same issues, and so we want to make sure that those are being thought about very conscientiously and that the ultimate system is one that's workable in terms of preserving the public archive and allowing access to it. Does that make sense? I guess the question that I have then is what, if anything, can we do at this stage? It sounds like the consultant's going to really be the one to work out the details of what the departments need. And I think as Member Washburn pointed out, that should also be looking at what members of the public and what the Public Record Act requirements are in terms of, and the Sunshine Ordinance requirements are in terms of retention and retrieval of emails and other electronic documents as appropriate.
So a couple recommendations is, since email will fall under operations and infrastructure for the department, I would be a person that you could talk to, as well as attend the COIT meetings, the main body ones and the subcommittee ones. Look at those agendas. If you'd like to get something on an agenda, submit that to COIT 2 to where you could talk about this with the client departments as well. Another thing that you could do is actually, if you have some of these requirements or things that you would like to see, start to codify those so we can actually get those to the consultants that come in and aggregate the requirements, as well as make sure that they sit down and talk to you as part of that requirements gathering phase.
Sounds reasonable.
Well, I mean, I certainly appreciate this. This has been very helpful because I was unclear about where in the process you are, and it sounds like, but for the budget cuts, you might be
well down the road.
further down the road than we had expected. But it doesn't appear to be too late, I guess, which is good for us, to start having just cognizance or trying to get more public input, perhaps, on the issue of retention and retrieval and archiving, those issues. So I definitely appreciate you coming to see us. Is there anyone else in the department that we should talk to about this issue? It sounds like you're probably the person.
I would probably be the point person within the department. Kim Thompson, who also manages the email group, if you can't get hold of me, would also be someone to talk to. And then Chris Bean also as the CIO for the city.
Any other questions?
I'm good.
I would
Thanks.
invite public comment on this issue if there are any members of the public. Seeing no members of the public comment is closed. I want to thank Mr. Thompson and Mr. Robinson and Ms. Thompson for coming. I really appreciate you coming because we really have been struggling with this issue. It's something that we've seen repeatedly as complaints. And I know that departments get subpoenas for this sort of information every day from courts. So it's good to know it's on the top of your agenda, and hopefully we can work together and make sure that the public's interest in this is also being considered by the department as we move forward to hopefully a more efficient and better email system, if not less expensive, probably more expensive, I guess. But I appreciate you coming, both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Member Need, do you have any other suggestions about what our next steps might be on this, or how we can move this issue forward? Just for the other, Member Washburn and Member Johnson's edification, the full task force did recently try to get a formal working group or I guess it would be an ad hoc committee on technology to be designated to deal with this issue, but because of the budget cuts, we were told by the clerk of the board that we couldn't get staff to have that meeting, and so that's why it's kind of maintained its position here with Member Nee pushing it forward. I mean, it really is, as you can see even from this short presentation, a very complex issue that has a number of different components with respect to the document retention policy, the deficiencies in the city attorney's advice or consistency of advice, which DT admitted or told us here today, and the technological issues, both with respect to what we have in Lotus Notes and the migration to Microsoft Exchange. So this is going to be a long process, but I appreciate the efforts of everyone to try to move it forward.
At this point, I suppose one of the things that I need to do is to get together with Chris, find out what our current capabilities are, particularly for backing up and storage and archiving and so forth, and maybe develop a set of guidelines from there.
I mean, I think the one thing that we might be able to do is to look at our record retrieval policy, which is really the Board of Supervisors policy, and to see what we want to deviate from in terms of our practice. Mm-hmm. So how long do we want to keep correspondence? How do we want to define correspondence? Should it be more broadly defined than it is under our current policy? We want to make it clear that emails should not, for example, be printed, but that the original electronic version should be archived. So that's kind of the policy that we'd like to see, and then maybe work with Chris and the clerk of the board, if as necessary, to see what the technology is in place to be able to implement that, whether or not we might be able to be moved to the Microsoft Exchange server, assuming the clerk of the board is on the same server as and is being serviced by DT, which I think they are. Mm-hmm.
So perhaps. Well, we can do it one of two ways. I can sit down with Chris and perhaps request a meeting with Angelo Calvillo, or we could ask Angelo Calvillo to attend our next meeting, see what she can tell us in terms of what we're able to do here.
I think maybe just meeting with her first would be the better step. To get her to start thinking about these issues and tell her, kind of just saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try to revise the retention policies for the task force. Mm-hmm. And we want to work with you and with Chris and with the Department of Technology to see what we can do about putting that into place, making it real, and kind of creating a model for the other departments based in part on the realities of what the city will have once the Microsoft Exchange server is operational, right? So once we have greater capacity, and just try to push it forward that way, make it so it's an example that we're trying to use for the task force, but something that could be applicable more broadly.
I think I may just have a comment relating to my other one beforehand, where he said, sometimes it's up to the personal individual, and that's why I'm not quite sure how we are maintaining our electronic emails on a hard copy, but I have every email that was ever sent to me about SOTF in a folder, and then I have it on a little $10 extra little thing, so...
Drive?
Yeah. That's why I was like, I don't understand why this is such a problem. And I know that some of them are like, I'm not going to be there this afternoon.
Right. That's probably under the record retention policy of the Board of Supervisors. That's a record that would not be needed.
But if anyone ever wanted to view anything of my service, I would just hand it over.
Right.
Be like, there it is.
Right. I mean, well, the problem being that you may be able to keep all of yours on that one thumb drive, but you were one of probably 3,000 commissioners, and then one of, you're not even an employee. How many employees does the city and county have? Chris,
well, I think technically we're employees, but...
So I think your analysis is right. It's very simple for perhaps one individual and perhaps maybe even for one department or the task force, but it becomes...
That's why I'm like,
remarkably more complex when you look at it.
When they reach, it's sort of like it looks like everyone just goes into their potential is maxed out. And then that's when they decide. They don't have a regular, like a quarterly system where they're like, okay, I should go through these documents and see which ones are the important ones and which ones should be let go. maybe that's somewhere with that we could go forward, where there's a regular time period where whoever's responsible to cut it down, because it really just the implications that I got was everyone just goes until it's maxed out, and then they're told you're full, delete it.
Oh, I think I've heard other city employees say that they get an email saying your mailbox is approaching at 98% capacity. You must delete something, or else you won't be able to send emails.
Right. Yeah.
And so they do that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, certain departments may be on top of this. Certain departments may be sending out reminders every month saying, remember to clear out your email and remember to delete documents that don't qualify as correspondence that should be maintained. And I mean, that's where in terms of the public's perspective, that's where there's been problems, is that certain people have deleted emails that the complainants believe are documents that should be maintained, but the people deleting them thought that they were not. So, I mean, that's kind of a separate but related issue. You have the issue of keeping on top of it, and that there's these limits that force people to delete, and then you have the individual decision makers deleting emails that maybe should not be deleted. So,
Well, if nobody's happy, then it seems like it's fair.
I think no one's happy. I think that's probably fair.
It looks like, it's possible technologically to have pretty much unlimited capacity, certainly with the new system and servers, elsewhere hosted servers. So maybe that won't be the issue so much as how to find something. And I'm wondering if there are best practices that have been developed, I don't know, by the feds or, state government for ways to tag your emails so that they can be found. Or I don't know. I know in scientific articles you have to have keywords, so that's one great way to find things. But
I think
certain
there are
fields to type of, what the type of this and, 2 words for the subject matter. I don't know if that exists.
I think, remember, Nee, at one point you were contacting kind of national FOIA advocates and trying to find whether or not there were kind of best practices for email and document retention. And I personally know that I see very occasionally emails from the National Archives or others that I know there are some documents out there. And this is an issue that the feds are struggling with, the states are struggling with, municipalities are struggling with, organizations and businesses are struggling with. So it's definitely out there. I think there are best practices. I don't have a handle on what any particular good ones are, but if you had some time and maybe wanted to go on the internet or try to find examples of best practices, that would be really useful, I think, to be able to bring that back and share that with the committee. You may talk to Member Nee to see what he found, because I can't recall if you were successful in finding documents that had that sort of information.
Not too successful. I started to try to do some research on it, and we got sidetracked with some of these other issues that arose. The Brechner Center down at, I think it's the University of Florida.
Pointner Center?
Brechner, Brecchner.
There's a Pointner Institute down there, but yeah.
I think it's part of the University of Florida. I think they've been kind of a repository of information on it. I don't know how much they have actually collected that they could impart to us, but I can go back to them and see what kind of guidance they can provide.
And I believe there might be something in the GAO, the federal GAO. I know that they've looked at this issue. Another place I would look is the National Archives, because they are very interested in this issue about how to the best practices for maintaining electronic public records, and they may have something or links to other studies that have been done. But I think if we could get a few examples of best practices that we could look at, that would be very helpful.
I mean, it would be something worth, if the city had money, it'd be money well worth, spending, because it could save so much time and so much money down the road.
Exactly.
To institute something like this.
Well, if you wanted to nominate yourself to look for some of those documents to see if you could identify them, that would be very helpful.
I mean, I'm really curious. And then, Rick, if you could, or Richard, however, if you'd like to send me anything you have, too. Yeah, thanks.
I'll go back and look.
Okay.
I'm not the most technical person on this team, but if we want to start reaching out to them, then I'll volunteer some of my time. Just, keep me informed and send me some emails. I'll retain them.
Well, I think we could continue this for discussion at the next meeting, and maybe Member Washburn could present some best practices, and Member Neat could fill us in on what he's learned, the steps he's taken with Chris and the clerk of the board to develop.
And perhaps in that month's time, I can attend some of their meetings and try to make a more personal connection with them.
Sure.
Yeah.
I will also try to do that. I will look to see when the meetings are and see if I can attend some of them as well to try to not only find out what they're doing, but give input where appropriate. Excellent. I think that concludes this item. The next item, please, Chris.
Item number 4 is the continued discussion on the proposed amendments to the ordinance.
I am just making some notes. Thank you. All right, so we are continuing on the slow slog, it turns out, to try to finalize our amendments. The one thing I wanted to ask, I had a few questions for Chris in light of Mr. Darby's departure. I wanted to find out who has the possession of the original document, which is the document that Mr. Darby did that the purpose of it was to kind of hold inviolate the record of the changes that were approved by the full task force in June 2008. And it took a lot of effort because Frank had to go through and do manual underline and manual strike through so that we could have a document that the file size was appropriate to post online and to circulate, but also would be kind of the record of what we'd already done. I know that was in Frank's, I believe that was in Frank's possession. I want to make sure someone has that.
It is in my possession.
Okay, so you have that, and
Yes.
you will continue to hold that inviolate and not make any changes to it until until or as appropriate.
I promise.
Well done. I now that we've had that established, I do think that some changes need to be made. I had forwarded to Mr. Darby a list of issues that I wanted him to follow up on. Basically, I took Mr. Darby's changes and compared them against the original ordinance and found some errors that looked like there were some small errors that Mr. Darby may have missed in terms of strike through and underlines. And I'm wondering if I can work with you to follow up on that.
Certainly.
Do you have that document that I
Yes.
sent? Or do you want me to resend it?
Could you resend it to me? Because I
Okay.
think that document was sent to Frank.
It was sent to Frank. I think I might have CC'd you, but I wouldn't blame you for not keeping it.
If you can send it to the SOTF.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Okay, good. Well, that will help, because once we have this document that's in truly a final form, that will allow us to be able to clearly make additional changes. I mean, that's my concern. I want to have something that shows, here's what the task force has already improved, but here are some other things that need to be done to either make it consistent or additional changes that we want to consider the full task force to review. And currently, it's been a little bit ambiguous about who has that document. And keeping control of it to make that process clear. It set us back, I would say, a full year, the fact that we didn't have a consistent document that was maintained by the city. So hopefully that won't be a problem. The other issue is that one of the things I was working on was a cover letter that would identify the main changes, some of the substantive changes that we had done to the ordinance that had been approved already by the task force, and also listing who we had met with and when, because the committee, while going through these amendments, mostly in 2006, 2007, and early 2008, met with a number of not only members of the public, but also constituents. And I think what we were still trying to identify, Chris, was the date that we met with Paul Zarefsky and the date we met with Susan Misner. You would identify the date we met with Lynn Caw from the Office of Contract. I'm not really sure what that's how it was
Contract administration.
Is that what it is? That's the way it was listed in our minutes. I thought Office of Contract doesn't sound right. So Office of Contract Administration and Mr. St. Croix from the Ethics Commission, we've identified those, but we still need to identify the dates of our meeting with Mr. Zarefsky and Ms. Misner.
Madam Chair, I do have a feeling of when the Susan Misner meeting occurred. But I haven't, looking at the minutes, I haven't been able to really pinpoint the time and place.
It would be after I joined the task force. I'm not sure when that is anymore. It seems like an eternity, but it would be after I joined the task force that both of those meetings occurred. And I was on the Compliance and Amendments Committee.
I believe Lynn Caw was this year.
Lynn Caw was actually 2007.
Oh.
May 9th.
2007.
Right.
I was shocked to find that out too. It seemed just like last year.
I've been having fun.
And John St. Croix was April 2007. So if you can get me that information, I will finish that cover letter by the next meeting. And I think that will provide us a document that then we can use if we start meeting with, for example, members of the Board of Supervisors to talk about what changes we've made, to get their input about what changes might still need to be made and the concerns that they have about our proposals, because that's the sort of groundwork that we really need to start on soon. And I think a lot of folks have expressed interest. I know Member Chu, who couldn't be here, has expressed interest in doing that kind of meeting with the various members of the board and trying to get their input on the proposals and get them to buy in, or working with them to try to figure out if we can resolve any outstanding issues. So once we have this cover letter, I think that will be able to be a useful tool in that process for those who don't want to read all 50 pages of the amendment.
Right.
The other thing, so I will do that, and the minutes should reflect that I will do that, finalize that cover letter by the next Compliance and Amendments meeting. The other thing I would ask, especially our newer members, Member Chu and Member Washburn, I know that Member Doyle has read through the amendments and has some questions we'll probably talk about today. But
I have as well.
Oh, you have as well? Oh, good. Yeah, because what I really want to find out is if other people have been able to find any inconsistencies or have questions or concerns that looks like things that we haven't addressed, or want to know why we did something, that we should at least get everyone on the same page at this committee. So without objection, I would ask Member Member Johnson and Member Washburn to let us know what they've uncovered.
My question is about passive meetings, and it really has to start with the EOT. And our training sessions about going out, it looks like under this that they need to be posted in some way beforehand so that members of the public, they may attend those meetings. So if that's being done, if it's going to be done, and how it's going to be done.
I do believe that was one of the changes we wanted to implement, was to have passive meeting bodies have a notice requirement so that
it is in there.
So that individuals could find out about them, which they don't need to now. And the way it would be done is just require them to notice with the contact name and contact information, the time, place, and nature of the gathering 72 hours in advance at the main library and on the city's website. That's how. So it would be done consistent with the requirements for public meetings.
So the chair would do that.
Basically, the chair and/or many passive meeting bodies, not all though, have a staff member from the commission or from the a city employee who acts as a staff member. So basically, the committee or the commission or the meeting, the person holding the meeting would be responsible for making sure that happened. Kind of the same way, I mean, you know, we're not spelled out who's responsible for posting our meetings, but our administrator does it. So, but you may raise a good point because there are some that don't have staff. And so essentially the chair or the person calling the meeting would be required to make sure that that was complied with. So it is a burden. I would agree with that, but it's something that we considered.
I'm all for it. That was one of the things where I was like, I know this isn't, we're not, you're not on EOT anymore, are you?
No.
And Chan just got relief. So is it just me and Sue Coffin? Who's the current members of EOT, Chris?
Through the chair, it's Sue Cawthon, Member Johnson, and Member Williams.
Oh yeah, Williams, because she's resolved all her issues. Yeah. Okay.
In reading through the proposed amendments, I was wondering, this has to do with passive meeting bodies too on the next page, actually. And it says that the person presiding may, at his or her discretion, entertain public comment. And I'm just wondering, in terms of the public's point of view, because, you know, normally at a commission meeting or meeting of a public policy body, they are able to speak. I'm just wondering, this might seem like an inconsistency, or you know, why am I not allowed to speak at this type of meeting? It's kind of a subtle thing to point out to members of the public. I'm wondering why there couldn't be this requirement that public comment be allowed.
At passive meetings?
Right.
I mean, I think, Member Nee, you can answer if you want. I mean,
go ahead.
My sense is that there's a significant difference in the requirements between the two bodies. That's a recognition of the fact that policy bodies set and implement policy of the city and county of San Francisco and have basically a greater impact on the daily lives of the citizens. Whereas passive meeting bodies may be bodies that were formed to kind of go into or discover different issues and make policy recommendations back to their policy body or back to a department head, but they are not the ones who are responsible for implementing or making the final decisions on policy. So that's kind of the, if you will, the distinction between the two.
I understand the distinction.
And commensurate with the distinction is an idea that for the passive meeting bodies who may not have staff resources, there should be fewer burdens placed on them in terms of not being required to take minutes, in terms of formally not being required to post an agenda, which is the one thing that we've changed, and in terms of not being required to have public comment, because what that would mean is that many passive meeting bodies are more informal gatherings, people sitting around a table and discussing certain issues, and requiring those bodies, and this is, I'm not saying I'm for or against it, but requiring those bodies to have public comment would require, first of all, a certain structure that they may not have, but then also may require those meetings to turn into, as opposed to an hour meeting to discuss, you know, recommendations to the library commission on, you know, upgrading computers, instead of an informal discussion of potential recommendations, it would be a 6-hour meeting commiserate with the library commission if 100 people showed up and wanted to give public comment. So, I mean, that's the idea, is that you have these bodies that are not tasked with developing or implementing policy, but are, you know, basically going out and theoretically doing research or gathering information that they will then channel back to a different body. That's the theory, at least. And that to require those meetings to somehow, now comply with all of the rigors, and including public comment, which can take in many meetings an hour, 2 hours, is too onerous a burden. I think that many folks that I know who chair passive meetings will take public comment, but it's at their discretion. They're not required to. So that's kind of the thinking behind it.
Yeah.
In my view. Member Nee may have something more to add.
No, I think you've pretty much summed it up much better than I could have done. There are some differences, and the ordinance recognizes those.
Yeah, I see the distinctions definitely between the two types of gatherings. But I'm also thinking if an idea is to have public's opinions inform policy, then, that's why they're permitted to speak, not just to gripe, but to impart some good ideas often, then allowing that to happen at passive body meetings that are feeding information and recommendations to the policy body, I think is good practice. And I'm wondering if there's some way to make it manageable. Say, have a constricted amount of time. That may cut everybody off short, but that's just my thinking, and I'm very new to this.
The members of the public
issue.
Members of the public can also speak directly to the policy bodies.
I realize that, but I'm just thinking that sometimes maybe a lot of the work and the thinking has been done in these passive bodies. Policies are almost set in stone, and so, not really, they haven't been voted on, but I'm just thinking about a way to get the public's input earlier rather than later, in a reasonable way that doesn't keep people at meetings for 6 hours, which I've come to appreciate how bad that can be.
Well, as an example of EOT, when we did a training session, we told them that they needed to have public comment at the end of their meeting for the public, and post their agendas and have minutes, So, and all we did was a demonstration as a PowerPoint that was very quickly the synopsis of the ordinance. So that's where I think, as an example, it would be almost after we gave the PowerPoint presentation, if the public wanted to comment on that or see, and we had so many questions coming at us in greater detail about their specific problems. I see where you're coming from too, but I kind of like it the way that it's written, where it's may or may not. I think that if we are having a passive meeting, that, like you said, you can, if you felt it was necessary, and you were part of that passive meeting, to be like, it's a new one here, I want to comment on anything.
Hey, maybe we could say something like, are encouraged to invite public comment. I don't know. If you notice the public, if you carefully notice the meeting, making sure they're aware of it, and you invite them, but they can't talk, I can see where people would be confused, and you might miss opportunities for good input.
I think it's definitely an interesting concept. I was just trying to find in the revisions, and I can't, which is ridiculous, but the minimum amount of, what we have done is we've increased the minimum amount of time required for public comment at policy bodies. So we did want to raise the floor in the revisions from the amount of time as a minimum that may be provided, and we felt that the best place to do that, to kind of make that stand, which some in the city may not appreciate given the length of certain meetings, was to do that for policy bodies. I don't think there was a cognizant determination not to require public comment for for passive meeting bodies, it just really never came up. That's kind of where we directed, I would say, the resources or limited capital, if you will, is to try to increase the amount for policy bodies. But I think it's certainly a fair point and an interesting thing to consider. And something that we can, maybe talk about to folks who run passive meetings or people who attend passive meetings and find out, is this something that's been a problem? Would it be a problem to require it? There was a fair spate, I would say, 2 years ago of complaints about passive meetings, and I think what happens is that there'll be a passive body set up to deal with a certain issue, Golden Gate Park stables, or I don't know, something that gets the public's attention, and there'll be a number of complaints against that body because it is there's so many members of the public, and it's kind of this big, some Laguna Honda issues, then they kind of die down as the public controversy dies down. So maybe we can try to identify who the stakeholders are in that discussion and figure out whether or not there's a real problem there.
As I said, this was something that struck me as I was reading it through, and it's been interesting to hear more about the background.
What else has struck you?
What else? Let's see.
The other thing that has been put before us that we've all heard before is anonymous. People remaining anonymous. And then you put that, I think, on page 110. The identity of the sender of any letter or communication would be presumed to be public information unless confidentially is specifically requested by the sender. And then on the following, on page 113 of our packet, I guess, you've put down what is disclosable, right? That hasn't really changed very much, has it?
No, that hasn't changed. I think the only thing that changed was, as you point out, in the communications, in the policy body communications file, I think we made some clarifications to the information that must be disclosed, but I don't think we've expanded it. There have been some complaints about it in terms of resumes and CVs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've expanded it, but hopefully we clarified some things. It's my recollection.
I liked the clarification because since my turn on here and serving, it's been an issue of like what people want to disclose and not disclose. We're also changing the name to the Sunshine Commission, which I thought was very nice too.
One thing that struck me, I was reading the Supervisor of Public Forums, and which I think is a good idea. Although that if it's the same person as the Supervisor of Public Records, that could be a big burden. But at the bottom of page 42 and then continuing to the next page, if the policy body or passive meeting body fails to comply with any such order, an order from the Supervisor of Public Forum, the Supervisor of Public Forum shall notify the Ethics Commission, Board of Supervisors, DA, State Attorney General, and then we'll be CC'd on this. And I was looking at that thinking, are any of those people going to do anything about it? And
basically we just made, I believe that language is consistent with the current Supervisor of Public Records. Yeah, it presumes that the Supervisor of Public Records, the Supervisor of Public Forums would find the department or agency in violation, which I think has happened infrequently, but it has happened, and that then the department would refuse to comply, and then they basically gives them the same referral power that we have. Basically makes it consistent. I don't think it's a change from what's the current language that's in there. I don't believe. It might spell out a little bit more about who they can refer to, which is something we've done in the amendments just to make that clearer. But the underlying issue is a complex one. I'm not sure that there's much we can do to resolve it.
I was just thinking if, just imagining that this report will be made and nothing's done, but, what we've been doing here is holding hearings and bringing people in and asking them questions, and we have a mechanism for training and so forth. I don't know. It would be, we might have a lot of business, but more than we want. That was what struck me. Not necessarily wanting us to have more power, but what will affect change in behavior with regard to public forums.
Well, many people, I think what's important to know is that it's not an exclusive provision. You can file a complaint with the task force and file a request with the supervisor of public records or public forums. I believe there's different time frames, but just because you choose one doesn't mean you can't choose the other. So it's basically just giving another procedure the complainants can choose to go through, and hopefully it would allow the city attorney to look at it in a different light. Perhaps not, perhaps it would. So, the only additions really to that section are to make it consistent. One of the complaints that we had is you have a supervisor of public records that hears these issues on public records, but what about a decision by the city attorney's office on access to public meetings? There wasn't one. And so it was just kind of to provide that mechanism or to expand it.
Okay.
Also, this is probably a question. 6721 about, people not coming to the meetings. It has been expanded, correct? That's on page 95.
6721?
That's the one.
Is that the new 6721?
Yeah.
Or is it new something else?
New 6739.
Yeah, 6739.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have,
The commission.
Packet page 148.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I unfortunately threw out I have a copy that I'm working from, and so I didn't bring my packet one. I just brought the one I'm working from. Okay. Yep. What was the question?
Are we going to be? It seems that was expanded.
No, if it expands on provision in former 6721, which required attendance at hearings.
Yes.
The expansion, as it clarifies, it still requires someone at hearings. That's current.
Yes.
What it clarifies is that the representative must have personal knowledge of the facts and legal authority underlying its response.
Because we have had people come here and be like, I can't answer that question.
Right.
Okay. And
also provide a detailed description of the record search conducted in the statutory case. So we added provided some specifics on what we want them to be able to answer when they come before us, because as you've seen, we've had situations where they come and they say, well, I don't know, or I wasn't involved, or, so we want them to have those answers so that hopefully we don't waste everyone's time. That's the idea.
The rest of it looks amazing. So good job.
Madam Chair, I do have some additional concerns about that particular provision. Mm-hmm. And I noticed it has been expanded to include public meetings as well as public records complaints. However,
which provision?
67, new 67.39C.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It does not address the kind of issue that came before us last meeting via the complaint that Sue Cawthon had against the Library Commission. She wasn't kept out of a public meeting, but what did happen was that she was not allowed to she was improperly barred from public comment on one of the items at a Library Commission meeting, and I will work on this. I will draft some alternative language for the next meeting to present to this committee.
Well, I appreciate that. I would point out that access to public meetings, I think, is more of a term of art, which is meant to include, for example, public comment, the right of public comment. So that is intended to be included in this. And that if we go and add specificity to this section, what we would need to do is make sure that every time we use that phrase broadly throughout the ordinance, that we're adding the additional specificity there. Do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're
This
saying.
isn't the
but-
only time that concept is used, access to public meetings. So if we're talking about, one of the problems is that if you look at the ordinance the way it was drafted before, someone might have added more specificity here, and the intent was that that didn't mean to change it from a place where that phrase, the former phrase, had been used somewhere else, but the place where the phrase had been used somewhere else wasn't amended. So you get these inconsistencies. So we just need to be careful, and this is one thing I'd like every member to do, is to really give this ordinance a close reading and try to find out where we might have some of those inconsistencies, where we've specified access to public meetings differently in one section than the other, which a department could use to argue there's ambiguity. So I appreciate that, and I think that would be great. And if you could do that as part of a broader, really close review of the ordinance and figure out, well, we use this phrase here, but we use that phrase there. Isn't the intent to, do X? Because that's one thing we haven't really done that we need to do. So I appreciate that, and if you wanted to do that, I think that would be great.
Okay.
Member Washburn, did you have any other issues you wanted to talk about?
No, I just had a thought when you were
Yeah.
talking about increasing the amount of time someone could speak from 2 minutes to 3 minutes. Wondering if that will be a deal breaker for some of the supervisors.
It may be very controversial.
That strikes me as one that would be a problem.
Well, I think when we were talking about the revisions, that was something we certainly talked about and debated, and whether or not we wanted to spend our political capital on that sort of change. But we repeatedly heard from so many people how fast 2 minutes is, and it's so hard to make your point in 2 minutes.
No, I agree.
That we felt that it was worthwhile putting it in, but you're right, it could cause us some headache.
I agree too, but it's the spirit of sunshine.
Oh,
you
no,
know.
I
Yeah,
agree.
That's what the people want. So we kind of have to bring it to them to see.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm the one that wants the public to speak at passive meetings.
And if they have, if they talk about, that's going to be too much time, we're like, well, that's what the people want. They want more time.
Right. The other thing, it looks like we might be at the end of the meeting for today. So just to recap, for the next meeting, in terms of this item, I will finalize the cover letter. I will work with Chris to make sure that the final changes I suggested to Frank Darby to the manual tracking of the proposals accepted by the task force in June 08 are done. What I would like, all members will give the current version a real thorough read-through to see where we might have mistakenly introduced ambiguity, where the use of a certain phrase might help. And part of that, the one thing that I'm going to look at is Alan Grossman's suggestion that we want to define agency. Because throughout the ordinance, we'll say agency, or we'll say department, or we'll say department head, or we'll say, we'll use different phrases. And sometimes it's intentional, and sometimes it's not. And so I think we have the opportunity now to clarify that ambiguity about who are we referring to and in what capacity. So that's one thing that I'll look at. But any other suggestions like that people come up with when looking at them would be helpful as well. And then the other thing I wanted to make sure was that Alan Grossman did a very detailed review of the proposals with some comments that I believe Member Nee has and I have and Member Johnson has, because it was circulated to us at the last meeting, Compliance and Amendments Committee. And I want to make sure that Member Chu and Member Washburn receive a copy of that analysis. And, if we could look through that and also see if there's things that strike a chord with the members that we may want to take up at the next meeting, that would be, I think, useful as well. I will say on my own that there's some things in there that I think are good and that we should address, and there's things in there that he's raised before that we've already rejected, but there's no harm in looking at it again. I would ask Chris to make sure that all the members have a copy of Mr. Grossman's comments, and if we could review those in advance, I think that would be helpful. I have nothing further at this juncture, but I think on the agenda for the next meeting will be once we have the kind of cover letter that talks about the major amendments, once we have an idea about what few substantive amendments we may still wish to make, is kind of maybe dividing up amongst ourselves or others, how do we want to move it forward, which supervisors would we like to go meet with, so that those meetings will take place between the September and October Compliance and Amendments Committee meetings and start that ball rolling. So that's will be one of our items on the next agenda. Anything further? Seeing no members of the public, this item is closed. Can you call the next agenda item, please, Chris?
The next agenda item is the administrator's report. Besides what's in the packet, Madam Chair, we have a nomination for seat number 4. Person's name is Suzanne Manet from the New American Media. I met her this afternoon very briefly, and I'll be meeting her again on Friday to start her Form 7, the paperwork.
Fantastic. That's good news. And I had talked with Chris and Member Nee about the orders of determination from the last task force. I believe they're going to do revised orders that indicate, for a few of them, not all of them, there's a few of them that need to have some kind of either compliance or review. And Member Nee and Chris, I guess, will figure out what's the appropriate committee to send them to, and at least one of them will probably come to this Compliance and Amendments Committee for the next meeting. So,
Madam Chair,
yeah.
one of the things I think we should do is that on orders of determination that should have come back here, we should contact the complainants and find out if those orders have been met. And if not, then we should ask the complainants if they would like to appear before the committee, this committee next month. We should contact them. We should apologize to them for the fact that this matter has been delayed, and see, if their requests are being satisfied, and if not, would they like to bring this matter back here?
Right. Yeah, I think that's particularly true, but probably only applicable to the one where there was withheld information. But
right.
I think that's appropriate.
Right.
Any other comment on the administrator's report? And seeing no members of the public? You know what? We didn't take public comment, but I believe the record will reflect that at 5 p.m. there were already no other members of the public. I think they all left right after the technology discussion, and there was one member who seemed to be here for that discussion, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, so there's no need for public comment because there's no members of the public. But my apologies. I will be better about calling for that after 5 p.m. That was my error today. Item 7.
Item number 7 is announcements, questions, and future agenda items.
Members? Seeing none? Oh, yeah.
I have a question, actually, about that email. I think that we all got about being commissioners and not working for the city for 1 year after your term is over.
What's the question?
Does that apply to us, or running again, or how does that work?
I believe I believe what Member Johnson is referring to is a proposal by
Supervisor
Marr that would bar all commissioners from employment with the city for a year after they end their status as commissioners. We could clarify and ask Mr. Laurenti whether it applied to us as task force members, but my opinion is yes, it would apply to us if that gets passed. It would apply to this body. We're generally treated the same as commissioners. But I guess there was a question.
And then it says that when your term is over, but it doesn't say. It was sort of. It didn't say that you could run again for your term. It's like when if it says if your term is over, then that would be like your term was over.
Different issue, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a different issue. I don't think it applies. I think that's just basically it means when your term is over or when you've stopped being a commissioner. I don't believe the intent was to prohibit people from running again. I believe it's just to set a time frame from when you're barred from seeking public employment.
Yeah. It just didn't seem very clear to me. That's why I was like bringing it up.
That may be right. I would encourage you to raise it with Supervisor Marr's office.
That's all.
Assemblywoman.
Pardon me?
Assemblywoman. She's not a supervisor.
Oh, I thought it was I thought it was Supervisor Marr who proposed it. Was it Fiona Ma?
Oh,
No, I don't believe so. I believe it was one of the supervisors.
I thought it was Supervisor Marr.
Yeah, I saw that too. I think it is.
Well, we'll figure it out. All right. With no public comment, no other comments from the members, we'll adjourn.